Started, folks, pretty much on time. I'd like to welcome you to what is, in fact, our last session of this event, All Things in Moderation. Somebody said, "Oh, oh, thanks, Julian." Oh, I know. We made it through fire. We made it through flames, and I mean that in many different ways. And we're all in one piece, and we did it. Although we'll see where we are after this hour, right? But before we get to it, which I know you're all here to see, not me doing my thing, but I do need to just take the opportunity to say a couple special thank yous right now. For one reason, because the person I want to thank is about to walk out of the room, and she's carrying a broom and a dustpan. I would like to thank Patricia Ciccone, who has been working on this conference since we got a green light. And as many of you know, agreed to work on the conference under the dictate that she be allowed to choose the food. So all kudos to Patricia if you enjoyed your lunches the last 2 days. Thank you so much for all your work. We really appreciate you. Thank you. And of course, I want to thank the Department of Information Studies, the Graduate School of Education and Information Studies, the Dean's Office, all of the staff of the school and the IS department, the Office of External Affairs, the Luskin Center for History and Policy. I would like to especially thank all of the folks in here who volunteered to moderate the moderation conference. Okay, think about that. You moderated the moderation conference, and it was labor, and you did it, and I really appreciate it. I'd also like to thank the staff of the YRL, the Young Research Library that we are in right now, for the use of this facility and all of their support. And I would, of course, like to thank every one of you for being a part of this, because we cannot do it alone. And that's what I think we've determined over the last couple of days, if nothing else.
And let me just jump in, because she's going to run past herself and say, can we all thank Sarah Roberts for organizing us for these amazing 2 days of all the things that we wanted. So I just want to say thank you, and to UCLA for your leadership in getting us all in the same room together for a bit, because I know we all have important intersecting interests and we've had a chance to network and get to know each other. Some of us have met our heroes. Some of us have maybe made a couple new enemies, because you know how conferences and academics are. But I feel like we really owe you a debt of gratitude for getting us together, and I hope that there'll be a 2019. See, I didn't say 2018.
Thank you.
But I feel like the year after next.
Right, because all of you people on Twitter being like, and all your friends who are like, FOMO, but see you next year. And I'm like,
no, we're not.
Hurting myself in the corner, you guys. But no, I appreciate it. Yeah. We'll have that talk, everybody. We will do it. But I don't want to take up any more time. I want to get to it right now, because in fact, I want to go back to the genesis of this conference. And two of the panelists on this panel today were key to that, because these were two people whom I encountered in different ways, but we got to know each other. And I talked to both of these folks early on about the possibility of them doing something like this. Now, it wasn't at this scale at that time, but we were just thinking about what would it be like if, I could host you at UCLA, or we could have a conversation with some people who are researching in this area. Because one thing we all know is that it is rare to talk to content moderators who are out, right? I mean, whether they're under NDA or whether they're like, please don't bother me, or I'll give you an interview, but don't use my name. There's a lot of stuff. These are two people that's sitting here today that are here and are going to talk about their experiences in the content moderation, what do we want to call it? World. Yeah, life. Labor force, right? On the front lines, there's all these war metaphors, and I don't want to use them, but they're there. So I want to introduce both of you, and I'm just going to read your bios because that's the easiest way. So I'll start with the person on my right, who is, can we just call you Roz? Sure. Yeah, that's how I know you. So it's Roz Bowden. She is a former content review training supervisor for a little platform you may have heard of called MySpace. Everybody remember MySpace? Based in Los Angeles at its height. In this role, she was responsible for developing moderation policies, as well as training, supervising, and supporting all the content moderators at MySpace, one of the earliest breakout social media platforms. Her insights and experiences from the field carry resonance today and portend the very challenges platforms continue to tackle. And so she's going to take us back to the early days, which really wasn't all that long ago, and yet seems very long ago. Welcome, Roz. Let's give her a round of applause. And wait till you see what she brought. And then to her right, we have Rochelle LaPlante, or as you may know her on Twitter, Rochelle, right? How did you ever get that, Rochelle? You're right, thank you. Rochelle LaPlante has been a worker on Amazon's Mechanical Turk digital labor platform since 2007, where she has been doing a lot of content moderation, among other things, but a lot of content moderation. And she is a co-founder and administrator for mturkcrowd.com, a collaborative forum for online digital workers. Rochelle's interests cover the worker experience of content moderation and working as an advocate for digital workers' rights, including fair pay and treatment. She has spoken at conferences, appeared on podcasts, and collaborated with academic researchers studying crowd work and online content moderation, and also journalists. So thank you very much, Rochelle, for being here. Round of applause. And then Safia Noble joins us again today. What I'd like to do is just give each one of you a moment to say a little bit more about where, when, how you got started in this experience, and take us back, if you would. And what did you know about the job too when you came to it? Thank you.
All right. So I walked into MySpace, I think in 2005, and I did not have an account. I did not know what it was. There were a bunch of strange people in an office, and half of them looked like they were sleeping. And they said, okay, well, all we need you to do is look at pictures all night, and we'll pay you. And you're around the corner from 3rd Street Promenade, so if you need a drink, just go around the corner. And that was intro to MySpace. I hung out there for 3 years, and it was interesting. I could only take I was graveyard shift, but I could only take half or more of my team drunk, high, or sleep for about 6 months before I decided, you know what, you guys need a supervisor. I can't do this. So I was a supervisor. And from there, we started doing things like coming up with things to search and figure it out. And it was interesting. It was fun. It was different. I came out of the financial sector. I was an annuity specialist. And then I got the bright idea to leave the finance sector. And I'm happily back and safe now.
In the relative security.
Yes, I only look at numbers now. That's what I do.
Thank you, Roz.
Mine was kind of accidental. I had a full-time job and I was working as a social worker. And that wasn't paying great, as social work does not tend to pay well. And a friend of mine told me he had heard about this platform called Mechanical Turk. It was by Amazon. This was in 2007. They had just developed it in 2006. And so he said you can make some extra money on it. And so I kind of went and checked it out. And at the time, back when it started, it was a lot of like writing for blogs to try and boost their SEO. It was things like write about, a paragraph about why this gutter company is great, and then they'd use it on their blog to try and advertise. So it was things like that. It was not content moderation. And then as time went on, the type of tasks changed. It got to be less of that SEO boosting kind of thing and more and more content moderation. So I kind of just accidentally fell into it. Doing this in the evenings, and on the weekends, I got to be more content moderation, and then more and more and more. And then as social media got more popular, it kind of exploded from there. So it was kind of accidental.
I'm curious because we're here at a conference about content moderation, all about the type of work that the two of you have done. Did you think that there was an industry that was happening as you were participating in it, or did it feel like a kind of your own experience in the companies that you were part of? And help us kind of understand this evolution from I started at a job doing one thing and it kind of evolved into something else that included maybe a drink at night, to a full-blown kind of industry now, and what did you see in that? What are you seeing?
Well, going into it did seem like we were on this revolutionary thing, like this, nobody's ever done this before. I participated in like discussion blogs and stuff like that, Discus and all those other boards, and sometimes a moderator would pop up and delete somebody, or delete a comment, but it wasn't something where you knew that there were people out there who actually did this thing. So as we were developing the rules over at MySpace, I'm like, is there a rule book somewhere? There's no even a rule book. There's nobody who says this is what we are supposed to be aiming towards. So it did feel like we were out there on our own, just creating. There was nothing.
And in fact, I mean, that actually, the rule book that you're talking about was your own notes, in essence, right? So you would encounter cases, make decisions, write down what happened. Do you want to show everybody what you brought? Because it's amazing.
This became the rule book.
Remember that logo, you guys? That's it.
This is my Bible from when we had our meetings, when we were doing interviews, when we would just randomly come up with stuff while we were watching porn. We had to come up with rules, and I had to write it down somewhere, so I just kept it. And it's interesting. I went flipping through it yesterday, and there's a note in there trying to decide whether or not dental floss size bikini straps really make you not nude, or is it okay if it's dental floss size or spaghetti strap? Like, exactly what makes you not nude, and what if it's clear? We were coming up with these things on the fly in the middle of the night. Well, her butt's really bigger, so she really shouldn't be wearing that. So should we delete her, but not the girl with the little butt? These are the decisions made in the middle of the night. Like, that's what happened. That's where these rules came from. So it did feel like we were making it up as we went along.
I think for me, because my experience is exclusively on Mechanical Turk, we were always given the instructions. And so you never have to make up your own instructions. You always are following someone else's, but every company has their own. And I'll have that in the slideshow too. Every company has their own. And so we knew that, this company's got these rules and we're doing it for this company. And then this company is different. And presumably there were hundreds of companies out there that had content that needed to be moderated. And some of them were giving them to us. And obviously they were sending some of them elsewhere. But I don't think we ever really thought too far or too deep about where the rest of it was going that wasn't coming to us.
Rochelle, do you want to share some of your slides?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So first, I kind of want to just put this in two different buckets. The first, this is in my head. This is nothing like theoretical. I have no papers, nothing like that. This is just in my head how I organize. The buckets of mods are the people who do community moderation, like on Reddit, Twitch. To me, those people have some ownership. They're part of the community. They have a community account there. They have some connection to that community. And then the content moderation side is looking at user-submitted content, but it's people who generally don't have any connection to the community, or maybe they have a Facebook account, but they're not acting on behalf of their own self-interest. They're not participating in their own communities, and they're not moderating their own stuff. So that's kind of different. So what I'm talking about is the content moderation part. So as I was putting this together, I'm thinking about how do I show content moderation examples when nobody wants to see the examples. So what I kind of came up with is everything I've got here is screenshots that I've personally taken from Mechanical Turk in the past 2 years. I've covered the offensive photos with red squares. I have not covered up any of the offensive text, but I don't plan to read it out loud in detail to anybody. And I've included the requester or the company name if it was known. Sometimes it's not known and sometimes it is. If anyone wants the uncensored slideshow, let me know and I can send that to you in email. This first one here is the requester name was Andy K. We suspect it's Facebook because it says at the top the policy is, or the point of it is to determine if it's violating Facebook policy. So unless there's another company out there that is following exact Facebook guidelines, this presumably is Facebook, but I didn't put that under this name because we couldn't ever confirm that. So there was a list of things that you had to flag as inappropriate, and there were examples in graphic detail as to some things you should be looking for. This one is I took it yesterday or the day before yesterday, so this is very new. This is from YouTube. This is an example of one of the ones that YouTube has up. This one in particular looks for controversial, kind of sensational, clickbaity things. This one's like, is it about the flat earth or, things like that. There's a couple different types of tasks that they put up that you're looking for. This one's conspiracy. Another one is whether something's determined to be racy. And they also have other ones about things like, is it appropriate for children under the age of 13, under the age of 5? And the thinking is that this is directly connected to monetizing videos and whether the videos deserve to be monetized or demonetized. This one is reviewing an Instagram account for a program called, or a app called Schedulegram, which schedules your Instagram posts. So you're reviewing a link. That link goes to a particular Instagram account, and you have to determine if it meets these criteria. This one I included the top information from Mechanical Turk. It pays 15 cents for each one, and that's a pretty good paying task for this type of thing. Over on the side, you can also see where it says AA 30 days. That means you have to wait 30 days to get paid. So sometimes things pay quicker, but this one you may be waiting for 30 days to get paid your 15 cents. This was an interesting one. I looked at the company after I looked at the task and did the task the other day. It's from Pavlov.ai. It says in the instructions here that if you're unsure about the correct answer, to skip the hit. The way Mechanical Turk works is that if you skip the hit, you don't get paid. There's no payment mechanism for that. So this guy wants you to look at his image, decide if it fits this criteria, and if you're not sure, skip, which means you don't get paid for looking at the image and making any determination about it if you're not able to give it an answer. So after that, I thought, well, that's interesting. Let me look at his website. On the website, it says, our automation system will approve or review your images. So I am the automation. He replied to me, this is the founder, and said that it is human review, and he depends on people like me to do this. I then replied and said, it's only paying 2 cents, and he didn't have a reply to that. So this one is for Jacked, which is a gay dating app. It's another one where there's a lot of description about what is and isn't appropriate for their app. And then I marked at the bottom there that it says your work is accepted or rejected based on your accuracy. So if you make a mistake or if you flag something one way and they disagree and think it's the other, you'll be rejected, which means number one, you don't get paid. And number two, your approval rating on Mechanical Turk goes down. And if you have a low approval rating, you can't accept other tasks that require a high approval rating. This one is for I can't quite figure, maybe someone who's more familiar with this can figure it out. I looked at the website. It's a like a hidden shopper service where you hire this company to go out and do shopping at a business, and they come back with market analytics and information about how a business runs. But what the task is looking for is facial photos that is their front, the full face clearly. These images were all very pornographic, and so they obviously didn't want someone submitting pornographic face images. But they were some kind of market analytics company here. Sometimes it's completely benign. There's a web page called Photo Feeler where you can submit a photo and it'll tell you about is this a good photo you should use on a dating app? Is this a good photo to put on your LinkedIn? You can get opinions about different kinds of photos of your face and what people think about it. So here's a guy who submitted a photo, and you get to mark if it's acceptable or not acceptable based on these criteria they've given you. And then you get to mark if you think he looks smart, trustworthy, and or attractive. This is one example from Family Search. This one is looking for an inappropriate swimwear. So you have to exclude photos that have any kind of swimsuits that are revealing or too close-fitting. This is one example from Family Search. They also have different types of tasks that are not swimwear related, but ones that are, does it have any cleavage or showing your neck? Is there anything higher than the knee shown? Are there any images in women wearing men's clothing or men wearing women's clothing? All of those ones you have to flag and remove. So it's from Family Search, that one. This one, I don't have the requester name or any information about it, but this is another one where it says skip the hit if you can't find an appropriate tag. So again, you'd have to look at these instructions, go through the photos, see if any of them match, and if there aren't any appropriate tags, you have to then not get paid.
Unsee your C.
Right, yes. You can't unsee the image there once you're done. These last two are intended to show just the bulk of the image. You don't need to read all the text. It's just or the bulk of the text. For each of these categories, I have removed, there are about 6 images that show each of these things in graphic detail. Here are the 2. It goes onto this page as well. So there's all of these instructions, several images for each showing examples of this. And you had to scroll through the instructions each time to get to the work at the bottom. So you'd have to scroll through all of these example photos, read all of this text, scroll down past all of that, and then see the image you're supposed to moderate, and then, say yes or no to it. So number 1, it would require you to scroll through all of this graphic text and photos first. You would also then have to evaluate the photo at the bottom, and you have to memorize all this if you want to do it with any speed. And that's one thing that's difficult on Mechanical Turk, is because you're working for so many different companies and you're doing a task for this one and a task for this one, you have to constantly be flipping about whose instructions am I following right now? Am I following the right instructions? And then kind of do that mental shift over and over and over, because if you think that you're on a different one than you are and you mark it yes and it should be no based on their instructions, if it's rejected, you don't get paid. So those are the examples of all the instructions that I've collected over a while. So that's certainly not all of the instructions. I mean, there's many, many more. This is just a few that I grabbed. So,
and each hit comes with a set of instructions, right?
Yeah. Each company, each individual company has their own.
Roz, I'm going back to something you said a moment ago that I feel like really connects when I think about this kind of history of your early work, and then the specifics of the kind of thing that you're sharing with us, that these kind of decisions about, is it a big butt or a little butt, and the subjectivities, who has a big butt, who has a little butt, of course, who's wearing men's clothes or women's clothes, these kinds of examples that really jumped out. Did you ever think that the kinds of early work that you were doing might move in this direction? And I think, what does it feel like to see now the way this has been so operationalized with some of the things you talked about earlier?
It's really, I'm fascinated. I'm looking at, I wrote that. I wonder how they made that decision. Because when we were coming up with these things, it really was, okay, well, the girls with the big tits cannot wear pasties. The girls with the little tits can wear pasties. But is it a D cup or a J cup that makes it big? What's actually decent? And to who was the question. So, okay, should we allow people to cut other people's heads off in a video? No, but if it's a cartoon, I mean, didn't Tom do that to Jerry? And are we going to delete all the cartoons? Those were the decisions that had to come up. And, some cartoons a little bit more bloody than other cartoons. So Tom and Jerry can do it, but maybe not Speedy Gonzalez, because he just drips everywhere. Or else it was, okay, so what's really PG-17 versus NC-17? Because you can watch sex on TV, right? Are we cable or are we regular TV? How much sex is too much sex for MySpace? Those were the decisions, like, okay, so one pump or, more than, if we see a butt cheek though, those were the decisions that had to get made. So it's interesting looking at all that and just seeing there's still somebody behind the scenes going, yeah, but he's got really big balls, so we're going to have to not let him wear a bikini. There's always something that you have to make a decision on. It's a interesting, that's, wow.
Yeah, but it's moved from the notebook into into examples like Rochelle has, and then even further operationalized into automated systems. And so, we have seen that evolution of the decision-making process that you were making on the fly, codified in a certain way, and yet in many cases, it can feel arbitrary in some sense when you're doing the work.
Well, speaking of AI, my Excel spreadsheet, which I think probably is still saved on a disk somewhere, that was AI. because we could actually go back, and I started with a list of 300 keywords, and it was like all the fetishes that I could come up with and all the different variations on fetishes. So like we would run those as a script through MySpace, and can we find any groups that have this? Okay, now let's get those groups and let's go see what's going on in there. So that AI was an Excel spreadsheet. And now it's like there's a computer that can look at an image and decide if that's a nipple or not, which at the beginning of MySpace, we did have it. We did have they were trying to make it automated, but I don't necessarily agree that that's something that should be done. I think we need more people in content moderation and less AI. The subjectiveness of it requires it. The reason why we have people getting murdered on Facebook Live is because there was a decision made somewhere that, oh, well, we don't need content moderation on Facebook Live. But how can you not moderate something that basically allows people to be the media? Individual people decide what they can. I am the FCC. I've got my smartphone, and I've decided that I can kill people live on TV. On it is a TV, your computer, your smartphone, and it's everywhere with you. How could you make a decision somewhere? Let's see, I'm gonna count the colors here. Some green-haired girl in some room somewhere said, we don't need to have content moderation on Facebook Live. And like the witch that was sitting next to her, and the, white supremacist sitting next to her, and the former gang member sitting next to him nodded and said, you know what, you're right. Facebook Live doesn't need content moderators. That was my experience. That's who I worked with. I had a witch, a vampire, a white supremacist, some regular day-to-day people that you would run into. I had some of every character. I had a polygamist. I had all of these different characters, but all we were doing basically were deciding, based on your experience in white supremacist land, is this really white supremacist material? No, that's not white supremacist material. It should be on MySpace. Like, we're asking a white supremacist if this is white supremacy. Nah, go ahead and post it. These were the people who decided, I tend to believe that there should be more people like you getting paid a whole lot more.
Or you'll get back into the game, right?
Oh,
no. It's okay. It's okay.
That was, I feel like 2 cents is not really compelling to pull anybody back in.
That's absolutely not. Thank you very much.
Right.
Appreciate you.
Right. Rochelle, tell us a little bit about this 15 cents, 2 cents, because I think, I was sitting here doing the math, like how much do you have to see to make a living wage doing this type of work? And can you?
If you're doing content moderation only, I don't think you can, or at least I personally couldn't. Maybe there's people who can work through things faster than I could. For me, the 15 cents is about the minimum I could do looking at in a single image. If I have the instructions memorized and I can cook through it, like this, and look at the image and not look at it too closely, but look at it closely enough to know, with a fast computer and a fast internet connection, then you have a chance. If you're looking at the 2 cents things, there's really not any chance to make anything close to minimum wage or anything like a fair wage. The people who do those types of tasks are people who are completely desperate for money, who need to make rent next week and don't really have the ability to be picky and look for other tasks, or people who don't qualify for higher paying tasks because they have a low approval rating because they've been rejected in the past. People in developing countries who have a lower cost of living, people in America who have a lower cost of living. It's people who generally are in some kind of vulnerable situation who are picking up those 2 cent tasks. And then you have to think about also, are those people who are picking up those low paying tasks, what's the quality level they're submitting? And if they're submitting low quality, is it just that the images are being then put on the website when they shouldn't be? Or is this actually training photos and training a data set to be used as AI or something in the future, and what kind of quality are you getting out of it? If you are using these photos to train an AI to do this automatically in the future, and you're paying people 2 cents, and they're kind of, racing through it to try and make the most money for their time, and not giving great quality results, what's going to be the outcome of the algorithm at the end?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you still blur your eyes? Like, do you blur your eyes when you're looking?
That's the whole like looking but not looking thing. Yeah.
I used to do that too.
Mm-hmm.
We got to the point.
Lots of nods in the audience.
Or take out my contacts and don't put my glasses on very well.
Yeah. I learned to blur my eyes. We were doing like 300,000 images in an 8-hour period. So I trained people, okay, all you have to do is look really close, but move your eyes closer together and they'll blur and you won't really see it, okay? Just scroll.
Or if you kind of look at the top corner of one of the images, then you're not looking right at the center of it. But if you see a huge splash of red, it's probably blood, and then you can mark and move on. But
Yeah.
So I want to pretty quickly open this up to Q&A, and Sophia has offered to circulate. Sophia, as you get on the floor and we get some hands in there, I'm just going to put one quick question to both of you, because Rochelle, going back years ago when I first started looking at this, I was thinking about content moderation as a monolithic kind of one-size-fits-all activity. And what we have here today between the two of you are two very different kind of organizations of labor around content moderation. And we know the Mechanical Turk thing is really its own world, and your MySpace thing was its own ecosystem and its own world. So, and they're very different. The kinds of ways that you experienced the framing of the work you did, even though it was similar work, was like really different. So I wonder, Roz, because you were like kind of on the vanguard of this at MySpace, you were the one who was seeing this might be a huge liability for this company and they don't even really understand it. What happened when you brought that to the people at MySpace? And then the question, Rochelle, just real quick too, is who the heck would you bring anything to? So those are the two. That's just real quick for the two of you.
When I brought which?
That, hey, this content moderation thing is like a nonstop huge liability of all this stuff flowing into MySpace, and you guys might want to know about it.
Well, first we had a root structure when I first got there. Of course, there were lawyers around there somewhere. I never met with the lawyers, but I know that the lawyers existed. We would have the meetings, and there's things that would come up. Child porn was a big one. What are we going to do about the kiddie porn that keeps trying to get on MySpace? We can't just delete the kiddie porn. We got to actually do something with this. Well, what can we do? We don't know who we're supposed to contact. Should we call the police? Well, we don't want the police involved in MySpace. There were all these different levels that people went through just to decide, should this one be reported to the police or should this one be reported to police? Maybe it's kiddie porn that's produced by a kid. And, people always, what's the worst thing out there? I don't know. One of the bad things out there is kids like trying to sell themselves on the internet. That's something that MySpace had a liability on, that, what should we do? And they made these levels. Well, if it's the kid doing it, but they're not naked, then you can just delete it. If it's the kid doing it and they are naked, then send it to the kid section and we'll look at it. If it's a kid and it looks like they're being held, then maybe you call the police in the middle of the night, but probably not. If there's a kid and you can find an identifying location for where they're at, then maybe we should call the police. There were always different levels to whatever the, oh my God, do we have liability for? So it was just always levels to it.
For me, it really depends on the requester. And so since requesters can use an anonymous name on Mechanical Turk when they post, sometimes you know who you're working for and other times you have no idea. So when you go through the task and you see something that's offensive, there's usually a check mark next to it of should this be allowed, yes or no. It's completely up to them how they design their own task. But most of them it's like a yes or no kind of thing. And then you push submit and the company gets the results. And then you have absolutely no idea, does the company ever report this stuff? Does the company just take it down from their own website? Do they just not publish it? We have no way to follow up. And if you don't even know who you're working for, you can't even try and call them or send them an email or anything to try and find out what they may have done or not done with any of the things that you've seen. Kind of the dystopia thought on this is that for the companies or the people who are posting photo sets and saying, remove all of the child exploitation or something you see in this, and it's an anonymous name and you don't know who you're working for. So you don't know, okay, so maybe someone got their hands on this set of 10,000 photos and they're looking for that stuff to collect. So is what you're doing going through and helping these people collect these photos because that's what they're after? Or are you doing a good thing and removing them from a photo set to then be reported and disposed of? We have no idea.
We've got some questions out
Yeah,
here.
I
in the
have no further
audience.
questions.
Right. Except everyone's dead right now.
Except she actually almost just answered my question. Is the first thing I wanted to say to Ra is, my name is Jennifer. Hi, nice to meet you. I work for the Social Element, and I've actually been working in this industry for about 20 years, believe it or not. But your comments about trying to make the decisions and humans having civil debate about the difference between what is considered obscene and what is considered art, let's say, it just brought back a lot of memories. So I just wanted to say that, yeah, you were not the only one out there. You weren't alone, and good job. And yeah, just to share a story with you is, I can remember the first time I had a seriously passionate debate when I was managing the community of a teen media site with another community manager, who we were trying to decide whether the word bitch should go in the filter because, it's a female dog. And I can remember yelling at him saying, the first time I see a 15-year-old boy talk about how he is training and breeding his Doberman bitch, we'll have a conversation. And I sat back thinking, I can't believe this is a genuine, serious conversation I'm having, and I'm getting paid for it. So thank you for sharing those stories, and I think there's many, many more of them like that. My other real question was really for Rochelle about whether or not, I don't know much about Mechanical Turk, so thank you for sharing that. And I guess these moderators, my question was specifically about child sexual abuse, and that we know, those of us in the industry know that it is a federal offense to download and or share any child sexual abuse. Is that at all part of the guidelines or instructions that are given to these anonymous faces who are doing this work? Do you know?
No, I mean, you saw here, there's nothing in these instructions here that say you need to then, if you see this stuff here, then you need to call this number or do anything. And there is a concern, maybe it's paranoid or not, from some workers who don't want to touch these kinds of images because you look at it and then it's on your computer. And what if the police showed up at your house for who knows what reason and stole, took your computer and looked at what you had on there, and you have a whole bunch of these images? Yes. My husband asked me that. He said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I don't have an answer for this. Maybe I'll find out here, but I really don't know."
And
how do you do that?
All of us who've thought about that, and I have to say I've never been in a room with more than myself where I felt that I've thought about that. So I also feel a kinship. I've looked at the safe harbor laws and guidelines around that, trying to ascertain how and if those could be applied. And, again, as you know from this morning, I'm no lawyer. And I do try to play one all the time, like that armchair lawyer. And I was looking at those guidelines and wondering if it had ever been tested around this stuff. I don't know. Maybe someone does know that. But that concern has come up more than once when I've been talking about this.
I think I'll also add that, when people do this kind of work as a contractor for Facebook maybe, or at Facebook or something like that, you're on a work computer in a work location doing this in a work capacity. Mechanical Turk workers are in their own homes using their own equipment, using their own internet connection on their own time. So it's not, you don't even have the kind of the defensive saying, well, I was on a work computer in a work capacity being paid to do this.
Yeah, I just want to throw out there that for our moderators, we actually all work through a proxied browser, and we're told explicitly, do not save this content to your computer, do not download it. It needs to stay within the proxy so that it's specifically within your work resources and were legally sort of protected.
That was actually instructed to us by NECMEC. So yeah, so if you want to talk to anyone, talk to NECMEC. They're amazing. Yeah.
One thing I just wanted to say, I think a lot of the folks in here are the old hands, but for anyone in here who doesn't know what NECMEC is, it's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And that acronym came up again and again, and I just wanted to say it.
Hi, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about a tension that I heard raised between the need for incredibly explicit instructions, is it a D cup or is it a J cup, versus for the people actually doing this work needing to memorize all of these instructions and know them, and sort of where that balance is. And, I come down that the more explicit you make the instructions, the more repeatable the process is, and there's fewer chances for mistakes in some way.
You work now.
That's a hard one, and I think it's
all kinds of companies that you work
right. And so it's the memorization is probably the hardest part, and remembering which task you're on, and not having to okay, let me scroll up and look at those 16 example photos again to remember what I'm supposed to be looking for and not looking for. A lot of people who do that work will open up two browsers and have the instructions on one side and the task on the other side, so you can kind of reference back and forth, and you don't have to continually scroll, or have it on a separate browser or window or whatever, but still the content is still there. And sometimes you can right click and hide the images if you want to block those images using an ad blocker, so you just have the text. And for some people that's less disturbing than seeing the example photos. But I see the point of needing the explicit instructions so you catch the things that need to be caught, but how much do I want to read through 30 descriptions of different sexual positions? So it's the time. True, reading the instructions takes time, and you're not being paid for that.
It's a tough gig, Sophia. You got to run around this whole room.
Thanks. That's been really fascinating and helpful. And I'm just wondering, with all of your experience that you guys both have, what you think that researchers should be researching that would be helpful? Because obviously you have this great body of knowledge and all these questions and things that I don't, and I imagine a lot of the other people in the room, even though they're doing fantastic research in this area, don't have that same kind of lived experience. So what would you like to see researchers research?
For me, it would be the psychological trauma that content moderators experience. If you're working for a place as a contracting place that provides some support, there's something there. Whether the quality of that is enough, I don't know. So maybe changing the quality or what's delivered there as a service for mental health services. But for people who are on Mechanical Turk, there's literally zero. You're completely on your own. So we've built peer supports. That's what mturkcrowd.com is just a place for workers to come and vent and talk to each other and support each other while working on the forum or while working on Mechanical Turk. But nobody there is an educated psychologist or psychiatrist or anything. And so we don't have the resources or the information about how to help each other. So I think some kind of research as to not only what the effects are, but then how people can peer support each other who don't often have the finances to self-fund going to a psychiatrist or psychologist. If you're being paid 2 cents an image, you don't have $100 an hour to go pay to a psychiatrist. So some kind of interventions for workers to help each other and help themselves who are in this space.
I'd add to that, I completely agree with you. One of the things that I shared when Sarah and I first met was when I left MySpace, I didn't shake hands for 3 years because I figured out that people were disgusting. And I just could not touch people, and I didn't want weirdo freakers. The most normal people in the world are they're fucking weirdos. It's just, I was disgusted by humanity when I left there. And so many of my peers, same thing. We all left with horrible views of humanity. I think that people should research what happened to all these people who were looking at heads blowing up in the middle of the night, because that's what I showed people. I was the training supervisor. I put together the worst of the worst video reel for people to watch 30 minutes into their group interview. And they got to watch heads getting blown off, a little child porn thrown in. Here's a little bestiality for you. Oh, here's some good porn so that you, can pick up a little bit. But this is some weird stuff right here. Here's a little scat for you. And my only instruction to those people was, it's okay to walk out, and it's okay to cry, but just don't like throw up on my floor. It's important to know what happened to those people. When I left MySpace, the only job I thought I was qualified to do was to work for 911, because I figured I had seen everything and heard everything, and that's probably the only thing I'm qualified to do anymore. I don't even want to deal with real people because you're disgusting.
I mean, I think one of the big things, so when Roz and I met for a short time, 3 hours later anyway, and sat and talked, I mean, we talked a lot about the issue of aftercare, which is what you're talking about. And one of the issues that we know in all of the strata of the industry, whether it's Turkers, whether it's people who are, their platform is gone for the most part, or whether it's they cycle out of their contracts, whatever it is, they disappear. And it's something that Rebecca Rowe kind of talked about, that there isn't really necessarily a pathway in or up into the company, which is, when you get in your foot in the door in one of these firms and you're thinking, this is it, I've done it, I've cracked it, and it's actually more like a revolving door, right?
I think people should care that there's somebody sitting next to them in a cubicle who is perfectly comfortable seeing somebody's head being blown off with an AK-47. I think that people should care that that's somebody who's, if this place burns on fire right now and I see my coworker being burnt to a crisp, I'm going to make sure I get my cell phone and my keys and see if there's anybody I can help. And if there's not, I'm just going to walk out because, to hell with it. There's a person burning. I think people should care that those people are sitting next to them and that they have never had any aftercare.
Yeah, the desensitization.
I don't know if you necessarily have the answer to this, but this is for Rochelle. When the big companies like Facebook and Google are putting these pictures through Mechanical Turk, do you get a sense of what they're for? Is it research? Is it training the algorithms? Or are you being used as a sort of on-the-fly contracted additional workforce to deal with the main platform?
I don't think we ever quite know for sure. There's people who try and detective work it out. Sometimes you can email the requester if they have some information shown, and you can say, sometimes we just do this just as a test. Just say, hey, one of your tasks isn't working. Can you send me a link to make sure it works? And maybe it works fine, but it's a test to see if you can get an email response back from somebody with a real email address. And then you can Google that email address and find out where that person works, what team they're on, and maybe what project they're on. And then you can kind of get an idea about what you're doing. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, but that's one thing that people do try. The closest thing we've probably come to was finding out is about the Google or the YouTube videos that have been coming up a lot lately. The ones about the racy and the conspiracy theory, and the theories about that being related to the monetization of YouTube videos. For Facebook, I really don't know if it's testing, if it's research, if it's overflow, anything like that, but a lot of it's just workers doing detective work on their own to try and sort this out.
Any other questions?
We killed the room again, you guys.
I know.
Here we go.
Okay.
Thanks. So if you guys were given a magic wand and you got to design the content moderation system, what would be the features that go into it? You've hinted at a lot of them, but let's think this all together. Let's blue sky it. What would the ideal system look like?
I think I have pieces of it and ideas of it. I don't have a cohesive answer. I think it would be paying a fair wage. certainly 2 cents an image is not enough. I don't know
Someone
what.
please tweet that.
I don't-
Please tweet it right now.
I don't know what enough would be, but it would certainly not be 2 cents an image. That would be a starting place. Providing comprehensive support, psychological support, whatever that is, if it's trained peers, if it's formal support, to all workers doing this, whether it's on Mechanical Turk or if it's on a contract platform or whether it's for at a company within the company, providing that kind of support. I think requesters who post these types of tasks on Mechanical Turk are trying to evade that sometimes, and I think they need to be held responsible.
I think if I could design it, I would design it to basically just content moderation. To me is deciding we are the defenders of decency. Basically, we have a whole bunch of people and all of us are supposed to decide what's okay and what's not okay to present to the world. What can I scroll past sitting next to my grandmother versus what can I scroll past sitting next to my 6-year-old? If I were to design it, it would be this big thing where MySpace started out. And, we got a bunch of witches on staff with a bunch of Black supremacists, with a bunch of, a bunch of gangbangers, we got to have the gangbangers in there, but it would be that group of people, leaders of their field, experts in the arena, in a, the high witch would meet with the and they would actually come together and they would say, look, you can't just take off all the frog hair is important, put that on there, but just put it behind a screen. Like the witches would have their say, and so would the polygamists, they'd have their say too, and everybody could have their say, but there would be a standard that we could all agree to. For me, public deciding, on Facebook, let me click and say that doesn't belong, I'm the public person, that's great, but that's not going to help to not knock off people who are doing good things. I'm just a witch. Why do you hate me so much? Why did all the trolls come for the witches today and bounce all the witches off of Twitter? There's got to be some levels to this that they're not choosing to have. So for me, it's that group of high priestesses combined with some AI that recognizes what they like, that they believe, combined with actual humans, and a whole hell of a lot of humans actually looking and getting paid for it, for God's sake. And definitely some therapists on staff. Absolutely, because it's necessary. I don't think that it's being done right.
We're coming close to the end of this session, which I can hardly believe because we're barely scratching the surface, obviously, which means we do need to continue the dialogue. But I'm going to just take up the mantle of kind of like in a perfect world, which is always the question, but I want to put a twist on it based on what I've been seeing over these years. Because actually we all go way back. We've all been looking at this for a long time. You've been looking at it, and I've been trying to find you and finding other people. And one of the things that pervades this whole process, and actually one of the remarkable things about this moment that all of us is having right now, is that we're unveiling something that tends to be hidden. So, and Roz and I have talked about this in so many ways, and Rochelle and I have talked about this in a number of ways too, that, for whatever reason, whether it was somebody didn't understand your work, or it wasn't a thing to bring up at the dinner table with family, or you wanted to go out that night and forget about the job that you did, or you were under NDA, or whatever, there was a whole ecosystem of secrecy that prevented you talking about the work you did. How different would it be if you could be out and open all the time, and maybe even get certain type of accolades socially and otherwise for the work that you would do? I mean, is that as as big of a game changer as I think. That is not in lieu of therapy. That is not in lieu of a living wage. Don't get me wrong. But how much is that secrecy or that hiddenness contributing to some of the difficulties that we're talking about?
I think I heard this earlier from someone, and I don't recall who, so my apologies, but about people saying, what is wrong with you that you can do this job? And I think that's something that I hear a lot, and I don't have an answer for. And I kind of, it's deer in headlights moment if I get asked that, but I don't know what's wrong with me. Maybe nothing is, or maybe something is. But I think that we would have to change the whole belief of everyone else to have them change their attitude and not think about what's wrong with you, but rather like, what motivates you to do this work, or thank you for doing this work, instead of what's wrong with you that now you want to keep looking at these images.
That is on point, really, because the conversations that I had.
Credit to whoever said that earlier. Sorry. It was some, yeah.
The conversations that I had when I was doing the work. First of all, no, I couldn't mention it at the dinner table. Are you kidding me? Like, what did you see last night?
It's the generic you, Roz.
That was your day.
Oh my God. Oh, I just looked at 300,000 images. Well, what was really good? Nothing. The appreciation is not there for what we do. I told Sarah earlier, I came out yesterday as a content moderator on Facebook, and I let people know that I was going to be here. I really felt like I was having a bit of a coming out experience, because people, either they think that there's something wrong with us, or they think that, we're a bunch of spies, or, we're just here trying to make sure that you can actually sit down in a restaurant and not, like, the person across from you see a pool of blood. That's really all we're trying to do. And that's a thank you moment, people. So yes, not in lieu of good pay,
Right.
but thank you would be nice.
I feel compelled to say on behalf of this room that if there were ever a group of people who would say thank you,
You got it.
To the Army, I hate the more metaphors too, but to the force, the many traumas that you take on. I feel so many of us experience trauma on just in our own lived experiences, that's uninvited, that's not even a part of our job, but just as a part of walking down the street, and that you take on, both of you and all of your colleagues, that you've taken on this work on our behalf. Those of you who are in this room that we don't have up here, but who have shared your experiences throughout this couple of days. If there were ever an appreciative group of people, I know, from the journalists to the researchers to the industry people who are here over this couple of days, here to learn specifically from you and to think about the kinds of things that your work, the impact that it's having on this thing that we call the internet, and this experience we have called society together collectively. And so, is it too soon to applaud them?
Let's do it.
Thank them. Yeah.
Thank you for continuing the work.
I thank you. I thank the two of you for hanging in and making this a reality. This last panel showcasing your work, it's not a mistake that you're closing us out, because we're honoring you in a way that I never thought I would have an opportunity to do. I'm gonna choke up. It's been
thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you for being interested, all of you.
Did you know that we all cared so much? I told you, Roz, that people cared.
Seriously, she was like, "Oh no, I wrote my thesis," and I'm like, "What the hell? People care."
She was like, "You need to get a life, okay?" I was like, "I've been told." It's fine.
I was not aware that people actually paid attention to this on a college campus. Like, really, these are just the people in the middle of the night looking at weird shit for you. But
but listen, I came out of IT work too, and I spent 15 years in IT work in the 90s when it was the gold rush, and I was like, weird, I'm not getting rich. I seem to be just working a shit job all the time for low pay and no status. Like, what am I doing wrong? You know what I mean? And maybe it's Yeah, I mean,
it's not a coincidence that
Yeah.
that maps onto a panel of women. And, we haven't really talked about this kind
Yeah.
of dimension, but I think, Roz, you really kind of underscored it when you shared with us who some of the people are that are that were there in the office with you doing this work. And, let me tell you that it's real hard to get a white collar job when you're a gangbanger, right? So again, when we talk about what type of labor and what type of laborers are valued, I think the kinds of things that you all are experiencing map onto many histories and many industries in this country and beyond. And that this work is feminized, that it's racialized, that it's class-based in many ways, that there are these dimensions that also, I think, are part of the secrecy and the hidden.
Right.
I've heard Sarah talk about this as kind of the, the people who play the kind of janitors of the internet type of role in a way that we don't venerate the people who actually make this world clean and safe and reasonable for us to live in together. And so this is another way I think about the reframing and the way that we elevate the kind of labor that you're doing. And we have to bring attention for precisely the reasons, because of the fact that this is part of a depression of wages that relies upon a sexist society or patriarchy that is comfortable paying women 60% of what men make.
Right.
I mean, we could just take this all the way across all the stats that we know.
Yeah.
So for all those reasons, I mean, we want to take up these organizing strategies, because your labor is connected to many other types of labor that must be kind of upheld and organized and supported. So again, I'm just thrilled that Sarah, you put us together, and that you're ending us on this note. And
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank
and
you.
Roz and
I
Michelle,
mean
that
it.
you're here with us.
Thank you. And just one other comment. Roz, you were kind of rattling off the list of people that you used to work with, and by their identity markers. And all of us, again, we have talked about this again. We know that people who have marginalized identities are called upon to put those identities into the service of this labor. And that actually, again, these are cultural and social choices that we make about how we value those competencies, those specialized skills, those sets of knowledges, the code switching, the symbols that you are able to read that others can't read because of your sensitivities and your knowledge and your specialization and who you are. And it has value to me. And I'll leave it there. Thank you. Safia, do you want to just say a few closing remarks for us? And I'll take a seat, or should we sit here? I don't know. It's fine. All right, thank you. We're almost done, folks.
So one of the things that I think we can take away from this couple of days is that commercial content moderation work is incredibly complex. And I think if there were ever a way to kind of demonstrate that, this last panel has certainly done that for us. I've really appreciated, and I know I'm trying to summarize, I think, from all the things that I've seen you tweet out over the last couple of days and the things that you've been sharing, is that this type of work around this thing we call the internet, with this social experiment that's been unleashed upon all of us. Some of us have entered at different phases our engagements with it. We might argue after this couple of days that we'd never get an IRB approval for something called the internet to be unleashed on us. I feel comfortable saying that we'd never get, we're
going to need a bunch of Rochelles and Rozes to look at some stuff, because we're going to put some
nasty
stuff
that's going to get unleashed on the world.
UCLA will put the rubber stamp on that.
Figure it out later on the fly as we go. So this conference for me is really underscored, in my own work, I think about the people who are mischaracterized, marginalized, and harmed by the kind of content that circulates about them. People who have no control over what rises to the top of the pile, what gets pushed out. Who decides blackface is in and who decides the beheading is out. All the kinds of attendant values that you all have talked about and that all of you over this couple of days have been talking about. These are the values ultimately for me that really shape the world that we're going to live in, that we're living in now. And these are not, all values are not equal, I think we might be able to walk away from this conference thinking about too. We have some really tough work to do among various communities, societies, industries, to think about what we will prioritize and at what cost. And to me, this is one of the places where I think the reality of the cost of the types of platforms that we're engaging with, but not just the platforms, and how they benefit from some of the kinds of things that we've been talking about, but also what's circulating all around us, and how in fact is the deluge of content, information, misinformation, disinformation, violence all around us, and how are we going to negotiate that? And to me, this is part of what this conference has been about, is what are the terms of the negotiation of that? And if there were anything that I think I would leave us with as some kind of final closing remarks, is that we must remain organized and connected to have any kind of impact around these things. And I don't just mean for the scholars that we cite each other, because that's not actually being organized. And for the journalists and the industry folks, it's not just that we kind of glance toward the people who are kind of, studying these things, but that we think about what are we doing when we talk about content moderation, and how will we have impact with the kinds of research and reporting and labor that we do, so that we can realize the kinds of things that we talk about, which is not just a fair wage and not just the aftercare, but also the degradation of humanity and who really loses over the long term. I mean, we have no idea. We're just at the beginning, I think, of thinking about the long-term ramifications of the kinds of things that we've been talking about. It's nascent, really, even with 20 years of experience, right? MySpace just seemed like yesterday, but what will it be like 2 generations from now, when we see a further erosion of kind of a public information sphere, and maybe increasing encroachments of private information spheres that are fraught with all of these complex decisions and consequences, for sure. So I'd just like to congratulate everyone here for bringing your whole selves to this conference, for not throwing up on the floor, because I know there might have been moments.
It's not your problem today anyway, Roz.
That
would be me and Patricia.
I was pacing in the back a few minutes ago. Let's keep ourselves connected beyond the platforms. Let's do more work face to face with each other, exchange cards with each other. I know I'm old school. That tells you how old I am when I say exchange cards. I'm ancient.
We all
It's
love
cool.
We love that.
Get on the paper, you guys. Keep a connection to each other. Let's collaborate. Let's work on bigger. We're stronger together when we think about bringing our intelligence. No one owns this domain. This is a space and a place of intervention for all of us, with our own varying levels of expertise. And I guess I just want to leave us on a high note that there are things we can do. Certainly, the work that the two of you have done today for us, I think, dare I say, it's been transformative for some of us, illuminating for many, and inspiring. It's a call to action for each of us to use our resources, our voices, our expertise, our humanity to try to make the world a better place. And I can think of no better way than to think about kind of the world of information and images that circulate around us, and how those can be used to transform and empower ourselves and others. So thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for organizing us today. And I'll turn it back to you. And I feel like drinks are probably most definitely in order next.
We don't have the open bar tonight.
We can,
but we can go to
together.
a bar or whatever. But thank you, Sophia. Actually, I just want to say thank you, Sophia. And that concludes the programming. The one last thing I'd selfishly like to say is that if I haven't met you personally yet, I would really love to do that because I wanted to meet all of you. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Have safe travels to wherever you're going.
Travels. Stay out of all the flames, everyone. Thank you. Yeah. What's that? Okay.